Thanks for joining us on Newsmaker Sunday. This next segment that you're going to see does not come from personal experience. I've never been divorced. I don't plan on getting a divorce. I'm happily married. So I want to put that out there up front because I was walking around with this particular book all week long, doing a crash read on it because our guests, we are going to talk about divorce, and it's important to talk about it because 44% of Americans will at some point end up divorced. Those are the sad stats. Divorce in Arizona, the legal process, your rights, and what to expect. And our guests on my immediate right is Robert Schwartz, attorney, and his partner, Marlene Pontrelli. You guys have been practicing law together for how long?
We've been practicing together for about 8 years, but we both have been in practice. Bob over 40 years, I've over 30 years, so together we have over 75 years of experience.
And you guys have done some very, we won't name names, but some very high profile, you guys are noted in this field. So with that, we're going to spring into it. And let me get, thanks for being here first of all, but Robert, let me start with a man's perspective.
Sure.
What is the biggest thing when you have clients come in that they're stepping into this for the first time and they go, wow, Bob, did not know that. What is it? What's the big aha?
The big aha is Arizona being a community property state. I'm going to talk about property first, then maybe the children. But
okay.
The fact that Arizona is a community property state and that everything that's been acquired, both assets and liabilities from the date that the parties got married until the date you file and serve for divorce, is going to be basically divided equally. So it becomes rather shocking to a lot of people, especially maybe professionals who talk about, well, wait a minute, you're saying to me that I have to now divide up my personal professional practice 50% with my wife. And then the second biggest shock is, yeah, that's true. And when we start talking about numbers, a lot of what you're going to wind up paying is after taxes, even though the government is going to require that you pay taxes on that money before you divide it. So that becomes a sobering and shocking conversation.
Marlene, from your perspective, and maybe from a woman's perspective, what's the biggest shocker when they start down this road?
And it's interesting because I think women tend to focus more on the children. So they come in and they're concerned about, I really am going to have to give up the children 50% of the time, 40% of the time, or I'm even going to have to share the children at all. Can't we just have a very flexible arrangement because I've been the primary caretaker, I take care of the children, Dad really isn't around that much, and they're shocked to all of a sudden find out that maybe Dad does want to be an involved dad. Maybe he is going to have some parenting time. And what's that parenting arrangement going to look like?
Are you guys part lawyer, part shrink in this job?
I think that's an excellent, excellent observation. I've been doing this about 43 years, and I think that maybe 30% of the time you're a psychologist, amateur psychologist, therapist, support system. 70% of the time you're the lawyer. Because listen, we are seeing people at probably the worst time in their life.
Good point.
People come to us not because they're happy and gay and everything's wonderful. They're coming to us because there's been a loss. And for a lot of people, this is the equivalent of losing somebody. I mean, there's a mourning process. There's a realization process.
You talk about that in the book?
Yeah.
Marlene, for women, let's just talk about this for a minute. Infidelity has to be a big component of this often for divorce, right?
Sometimes it is. That's certainly one of the reasons why people will often think about a divorce. I never think, though, infidelity is something that if the parties work at it, they can't get over it. But there obviously are trust issues then. Okay,
the infidelity thing is interesting, and I know in a no-fault state, but it's never quite made sense to me that if one person steps out on the other, that it's then a 50-50 split when one person in that relationship really decided to make the break. It doesn't seem fair to me somehow.
And we are a no-fault state, and so as a result, the fact that one person may have been cheating, one person may have done gambling, addictions, abuse, alcohol, none of those come into play with respect to whether or not you're going to be able to get a divorce. It does actually, though, come into play in what we call community waste. So if there's been a waste of assets because a party has engaged in paid for a
Put
third
gambling
party
debts
or
on credit
gambling.
cards or all of that.
Exactly.
Then that person might be responsible for a bigger chunk than just 50%.
Correct.
Okay. Let's start at the beginning. When you take people through the process, what's the first thing you have to sort out?
Well, believe it or not, the first thing that I like to focus on is, really, do you want to get a divorce?
You told me this when we first met.
And it's true. I mean, to me, we are the stop of last resort. And I'm a great believer in people going to counseling, going to therapy, and really making sure that this is what they want. Because when the process is over, you have to remember a number of things are going to have occurred. Number one, it's expensive. Number two, you will not be husband and wife any longer, so the children are now going to be going to two different households on whatever basis it is. Number three, financially, you're going to have divided, either equally or close to equally, all your assets. So is this really what you want? And believe it or not, I tell people, go out. I give them the names of some good therapists or counselors that I think are great in town, and they decide if they come back. Well, then we'll sit down and we'll go through the actual process, the actual nuts and bolts of how do you file a petition, what happens, how long does it take, what's going to be involved, what are the potential costs, what are the potential problems, and try to give them a roadmap of what's going to happen.
Marlene, is it true that two can live cheaper than one? So when you, in other words, if you do this, if you go down this road, it's very likely, would you say, that both people will end up living worse in terms of standard of living?
The standard of living is definitely less, because oftentimes one party has been the stay-at-home parent or has not had the same earning capacity as the other party, and now we're trying to support two households on the same amount of income, and so naturally both standards of living have to go down.
And does everybody realize this pretty quickly and say, wow, this is going to be ugly?
They don't realize it immediately, and oftentimes, though, that's what we try to do in the initial consultation is, what does your life look like 6 months, 1 year, 2 years down the line, and let's have a financial plan in place, because it's not just about getting a divorce.
I want to show the book again because, and again, as I was carrying this around this week, people were really looking at me like, what is Hook diving into this book for? Divorce in Arizona, the legal process, your rights, and what to expect. The two authors are with us today. Why did you want to write the book? Because when I got into it, I thought, okay, is this a novel? What is this? What it is it's kind of answers every question in bold that you might have.
Well, when we decided to write the book, it was really to answer exactly what you said. We wanted to give people a roadmap and kind of a guide to what's involved. It was not written for lawyers.
It's in very simple language.
It was written for the public.
Right.
And it was written in such a way that anybody could pick it up. And like you said, it's not a novel. It's not, 50 Shades of Divorce. But what it is really a nuts and bolts approach to what happens. And the beauty of it for us, and we use it as a great tool in our practice, because it's really helped our clients. I mean, when we meet with them, we will provide them with a copy of the book. The index is excellent.
You've got even forms in there on how to do stuff, checklists and all kinds of things.
We've got from start to finish what happens.
Right.
And so yes, why did we do it? We did it because we thought it was a really, really good service for our clients. Also, we've been very pleased by the fact that the book's been pretty well received,
right.
Both on Amazon and in local bookstores. But we recently had a review written by a divorce attorney in one of the legal publications in town, who gave the book an excellent review. And he made a comment. He said, this isn't only good for the public, but this is actually great information for lawyers.
Interesting.
So
look at this and we go, wow, this is insane. And and the public feeds off this kind of thing in People magazine or whatever it is.
But that's why having somebody, or having the book, or having competent counsel that you can respect and can help you in this journey, because it really is a journey to try to get you from one point to the next, and really the rest of your life, and what's the rest of your life going to look like. So it's very similar to the things that we see, in television or on the news.
Right. Before we take a break, Robert, if you're going down this road, you just talked about the first step is to try to, in essence, talk people out of it. Say, look, try to fix it if you can. The next step after that would be what? What do you have to kind of gird yourself for?
You have to understand the process, and then you have to have a realistic idea of what is going to be the end result. What's going to happen when we're done? Who's going to be in the house? Who's going to be out of the house? What's going to happen with the house? What assets am I going to have, especially if it's the non-wage earning spouse, which a lot of times is the female. So what money am I going to have? How am I going to be able to support myself? What's going to be the situation with the children? What's the best arrangement for the children? So it's really sitting down with somebody and going through each of the possible outcomes and having them understand, okay, here's what the judge will probably do. Here's why the judge will probably do it. And maybe the best thing we can do is talk about trying to resolve this without having to go to court. Maybe we'll go to mediation. Maybe we'll try to sit down and have a sensible conversation. But like you were referring...
Is that difficult? Is that rare that you can have the sensible conversation, or is it so emotionally charged it's difficult?
I'll put it this way. It generally evolves over time because one or the other spouse is usually very angry and hurt. Because with some exception, most of the time this is a decision one spouse has made without the agreement of the other spouse.
See, that's a difficulty, I think, in no fault. That's tough. One question, I'm going to ask you the million-dollar question before we go to break. First to you, Marlene. Most of the people you deal with, if they've done this, if they circle back 5 years from now, do they think that this was worth it, or do they have big regrets?
You know, I actually tell my clients, the goal is that 2 years from now, you want to be able to look back at this experience and say, that was not the best experience I went through. I wish I didn't have to go through it, but I was treated fairly, and I'm going to be okay. And that's the goal for every client.
Robert?
See, I have a little different perspective on that. So I've been doing this, like I said, 42 years. And I'm going to exclude people who come in because of physical abuse, drug abuse, some kind of real aberrant behavior.
Right.
But I would say that the people who come in and just are basically looking for the greener patch of grass, 5 years down the road, a lot of them will say, why did I do this?
Interesting.
I mean, really, what was the great advantage? You know, now we've got two households. The kids have been split up. The animosity that's been created, the amount of money that we've spent to get down this road. So I would say a lot of people on reflection really wonder if it was worthwhile.
That is interesting. The book is called Divorce in Arizona, The Legal Process, Your Rights and What to Expect. Robert Schwartz and Marlene Pontrelli are our guests on Newsmaker Sunday. We'll talk more divorce right after this on Newsmaker Sunday. Thanks for joining us again on Newsmaker Sunday. We are talking divorce in Arizona. The book is called Divorce in Arizona, The Legal Process, Your Rights and What to Expect. And Robert Schwartz and Marlene Pontrelli, who are legal partners and do this at a very high level and have done it for a number of years. Robert, more than 40 years. Marlene, you've been doing it how long? Divorce?
I've been doing divorce off and on for almost 30 years.
Well, I got to ask you, why would you ever get into this? Because you climb into a world of acrimony and bad feeling. This is a tough legal minefield you're in, right?
It is, John, but you know, in reality, I feel it's the one area of practice where we really help people. We're dealing with individual people who maybe have had no experience with courts, no experience with lawyers, and we have this opportunity every single day to make a difference in their lives. And the best part of it is at the holidays, where they may have been through a very difficult divorce, but then we get the card during the holidays with the smiling
Maybe
pictures.
a gift basket.
And you know, the thank you notes that means so much that you've been able to help people. So it's a very rewarding practice.
You got into it, why?
I found
because you're married for over 40 years too.
Married 45 years.
45 years. Yeah.
Yep. I find it to be incredibly intellectually challenging because, fortunately, at the level that we're able to do it now, we deal with more issues than many lawyers have ever thought about. I mean, we're dealing with custody issues, so we wind up locking horns with experts, psychologists, psychiatrists on custody evaluations. We deal with high-end business valuations, so we wind up deposing or dealing with accountants, business appraisers. We'll wind up dealing with real estate issues, so we'll take depositions or wind up dealing with real estate appraisers. I wind up dealing with every kind of business you can imagine, franchise agreements, what's the McDonald's franchise going to be worth in a divorce? What's the insurance agent going to be worth?
If the split, because it's a community property state, if it's a 50-50 split, what's there to work out?
Okay, so here's exactly what I tell the client.
This is what our partners sometimes ask us too.
Okay. Yeah, why do you guys have such difficulty? It's half and half. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, every case, not including the children, but every case that we get involved with has the same 3 property issues. First is we need to identify what's in the community. We have a lot of people who have inherited property, that's separate.
Right.
We have people who are in 2nd and 3rd marriages. They've kept their property separate. That could be separate property. So the first step is what's in that community pot. The second step is let's value that community pot. If I give you $1 tax-free, it's worth $1. If I give you $1 out of your retirement account, it may only be worth 60 cents. If I'm going to value a business, that business could be worth, on one side of the ledger, $500,000. On the other side, the other attorney could say it's worth $200,000.
Oh, I see.
So we're going to fight over the value many times. And then the third thing is, you say we're going to divide it equally. Okay. If I'm going to divide up the assets equally, are you going to take the house, which has equity, but in order to get it, you have to sell it, pay real estate commissions, you may have some capital gains tax, or are you going to want all cash if we're going to divide up a stock account?
So there's tremendous haggle and wiggle room in all of this.
Absolutely.
The wife may say, for instance, I want the house, I'm willing to give up some of the business, some of what I would take from your business to try to make this equitable. So it's horse trading, right?
And it gets a little more than horse trading. I mean, it really gets down to some sophisticated accounting issues.
And there are tax consequences, you know, to all of that. And you want to take that into consideration as well.
You know, I've heard lawyers say who do some type of resolution or dispute resolution, or they do settlements, and they say a proper settlement is when both sides want to go out and throw up when it's over. Is that where, in other words, nobody gets really what they want? Well, is that about what you come down to?
Well, I tell clients, look, if you go to court, if you think about it, our courts are incredibly jammed, especially the family court. So a judge is going to give you as much time as the judge can afford, which in many cases is 2 hours, 3 hours, and if you're lucky, maybe a half a day or a day.
Wow.
So if you can go and sit down and have a reasoned meeting, either with your spouse, or a lot of times we'll hire a mediator, I mean, and spend a day, you two are going to spend a lot more time and a lot more energy thinking about what's best for you and your family. But at the end of the day, if both parties leave and they're unhappy, you probably have a good settlement. Children.
Let's talk about that quickly because we're running a little bit out of time. That's the big wild card, isn't it? If you've got kids, it's much more complicated.
It is, but you know, the unfortunate thing, and that we see this sometimes, is people using the children against each other. And to put, you know, we really try to emphasize, you've got to think about the best interests of those children. They're going to want to love mom and dad, regardless of whether mom and dad get along, for the rest of their lives.
You talk about this a lot in the book. Not to tell, you really urge them not to get the children used as tools in this.
And one of the things that people have to realize is you are going to be business partners in raising these children for the rest of their lives. It doesn't stop when they turn 18 and graduate from high school. And so how do we get you working together now?
The book is called Divorce in Arizona, and our guests are the authors, Marlene Pontrelli and Robert Schwartz, veterans in this whole minefield of divorce. We'll continue our conversation right after this on Newsmaker Sunday. Final moments. The book is called Divorce in Arizona, The Legal Process, Your Rights, and What to Expect. The authors are my guests this week on Newsmaker Sunday, Marlene Pontrelli and Robert Schwartz, who are legal partners. Social media has impacted some of this, hasn't it? You're actually seeing it contribute
tremendously
to the unraveling of couples?
Sometimes.
Yeah, tremendously. It's actually been a phenomenon for the last several years. One of the things that I've seen are the high school sweetheart connections through Facebook or some of the other. Well, Facebook, some of the other social media websites. People seem to think back to the high school days. Everything was great, no problems, and they're hooking up with their sweethearts from high school. And I probably, in the last 4 or 5 years, had at least 6, 7, 8 cases where spouses have reconnected and wound up getting divorced, going back to their high school sweethearts.
Marlene, are women going down this road just as frequently as men?
Just as frequently as men, and also though just on the social media, one of the things that is important to note too is if you're going through a divorce, be careful what you post on your social media websites, because your LinkedIn, your Facebook, all of those are usually open to the public, or somebody has access to them. So if you're saying you don't have any money and you're off on a trip to Hawaii or on a cruise and you're posting pictures about it, you can bet that that's going to be utilized by your spouse in the divorce.
Oh yeah, saying that, hey, you've got more money than you're telling me.
Correct.
Yeah. Actually, I'll give you a little anecdote that happened.
Yes.
I found it was funny but not funny. Gentleman was supposed to be away on a business trip, and lo and behold, he got a photo radar ticket in Paradise Valley. Had the top down with his arm around a very young girl, and the photo ticket came to the house. The wife opened the envelope, sees him in the car with the young lady, and he's supposed to be somewhere back east.
Did that start the unraveling?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and,
questions, and
yeah,
then questions
she's
lead
like,
to another.
you know, you're supposed to be in New York on a business trip. What's going on?
In this whole thing, with all the emotion flying, do you guys have some real knockdown dragouts in the offices when you're meeting? I mean, it's got to be unbelievable, right?
You mean between Marlene and myself?
No, between the husband and wife who are uncoupling.
We try not to put the parties together when there's that emotional harm, because we also have to be aware
Oh, you
of,
work it out with the attorneys first.
We work it out with the attorneys.
So they don't face-to-face that much?
We try not to, especially if there might be allegations of abuse, or there might be orders of protection in place, and we just try to keep things as calm and amicable as we possibly can.
Do you think no fault is proper? Do you think that's the way to go?
I think it is the way to go, because I remember the days when there was fault, and what happened is, unfortunately, it was a heyday for private investigators. Every kind of behavior became a big issue. Don't forget, these are all public filings, and this information is public. So I don't think it behooves anybody to air their personal problems, issues in a public filing, especially when there are children. And it also wound up in people having to create a lot of reasons to get divorced, just to get through the fault requirements. So
right.
Almost every state in the country now has gone to no fault.
The stats are unbelievable. 44% of all Americans end up divorced. 10% of marriages fall apart during the first year. Another 10% by the 10th year. Half of the divorces are within the first 10 years. Is there a magic number that you get by where you say, probably okay?
8 years.
8 years.
8 years is the that's statistically, it's
okay.
8 years.
Well, my wife and I are at 15, so we're in good shape, hopefully.
We're seeing a lot of marriages, though, after 30 years, 35 years, the children are out of the house, and all of a sudden, they want to go their separate ways.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing
that
some of
does happen. That does happen. Final 15 seconds each, and I'll start with you, Marlene. Best piece of advice for somebody going down this road?
Is do your homework, take it slow, and know what you want so that you know that you got there in the end.
Nice time cue.
Yeah.
Robert?
Interview a number of professionals, because as I tell clients, this process is almost equivalent of having surgery. You want to trust the surgeon, in this case the lawyer.
Well, the book is called Divorce in Arizona, and it is very, very interesting. The legal process, your rights, and what to expect. Marlene Pontrelli, Robert Schwartz, great to see you both. Continued success, even though it's a tough thing you guys do. We appreciate your time on Newsmaker Sunday. We'll certainly post this on the web as well. You can find it there, and I'll see you next week on Newsmaker.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and get all the best videos from Fox 10.